There used to be a time when the music industry at least tried to make things look fair. Back in the early 90s, some record labels were known for bribing radio stations with cash and lavish gifts in exchange for radio play, thus popularizing the term payola. This practice grew so widespread that the FCC eventually stepped in to ban it outright, resulting in one of the largest label settlements the industry had seen at the time. Then, in the early 2000s, the ringtone scam exploded. Kids across the world signed up for what they thought was a one-time download of a ringtone, only to find out that they, or their parents, had been locked into expensive weekly subscriptions that were almost impossible to cancel. And by the time they did cancel, many had already been charged hundreds of dollars. This got so out of hand that the FTC stepped in, sued the companies responsible, and once again forced labels to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and refunds. But somewhere along the way, things shifted, because the tricks and manipulation that used to happen behind the scenes have become so blatant that these days, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And nobody personifies this quite like Taylor Swift. Back in 2014, U2's Songs of Innocence was delivered as a free digital download on iTunes to over 500 million users in a move that disgusted many.
U2's new album, Songs of Innocence, is going out for free to 500 million people in the next 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wow, that's instant gratification.
But while it wasn't eligible for RIAA certification, it ultimately set a precedent for what people were beginning to unwillingly tolerate. Because just a year earlier, Jay-Z had already tested the limits with Magna Carta Holy Grail. With the help of Samsung, 1 million digital copies of the album were purchased in advance and given away for free to Samsung Galaxy users. Meaning that, on paper, it meant Jay-Z sold 1 million copies before the album even came out. But because those copies were bundled as a complimentary gift with the device, they couldn't be returned or refunded. Meaning that although it was RIAA certified platinum, it was excluded from the Billboard charts. It wasn't illegal, it wasn't even hidden, but it showed exactly how easy it was to bend the system when you had the power and the partnerships to do so. By 2025, Taylor Swift released her album The Life of a Showgirl and shifted more than 4 million copies first week, setting a new record for first week sales in American history. For context, that number beats anything ever released by the Beatles, more than anything Prince ever released, and demolishes Michael Jackson's Bad album, one of the most celebrated albums of all time, which is estimated to have moved around 2.5 million in its first week, meaning that Taylor almost doubled that. But the comparison that really matters is Adele, because for nearly a decade, her album 25 held the modern record at roughly 3.38 million copies first week. But once you look deeper into how Taylor dethroned Adele, the picture changes. Taylor released more than 33 versions of The Life of a Showgirl, or more specifically, 18 CDs, 8 vinyls, and 7 downloadable variants. Every edition counted as a separate sale, and with millions of devoted fans buying multiple copies just to collect them, the numbers inflated far beyond what a single album could ever reach on its own. But here's the irony. Those numbers were only possible because of the enormous promotional push leading up to the release. Because once the dust settled, the album quickly became one of the most criticized in her catalog, with unimpressed critics and longtime Swifties questioning the direction she took. In this case, the reason a rollout like this can still dominate is simple. Artists like Taylor aren't trading on the quality of the art anymore. They're exploiting fandom itself and turning record-breaking into a strategy. And that naturally raises a bigger question. Where exactly do we draw the line between savvy marketing and abusing a system built on loopholes? Because once the charts can be shaped and controlled this easily, they stop reflecting impact and become a scoreboard for whoever's willing to push the limits the furthest. But Taylor isn't an exception. She's the template. And the moment one artist gets away with it, the door opens for everyone else. Which brings us to Justin Bieber. When he released his single Yummy in 2020, he did one of the most bizarre things I think I've seen a major artist do. Wrapped in peachy tones and fluffy visuals in an IG post, Justin encouraged his fans to stream Yummy on repeat, while also instructing his international fanbase to do the same, only this time with a VPN so they'd inflate his US streams. Detailed were instructions on how to loop the track on mute while sleeping, how to build personal streaming playlists, and even how to buy multiple copies of the same song on his website. This wasn't savvy marketing. It was a desperate, coordinated attempt to manipulate the charts in plain sight. And the reason? Roddy Ricch. Specifically his single The Box, which was rapidly climbing the charts at the time. In this scenario, Justin or his team weren't hiding anything because the rules allowed it. And to add insult to injury, the song still peaked at number 2, with Roddy organically claiming spot. Still, when it comes to rappers who are regularly accused of this, few have flagrantly cheated the game like Travis Scott and his bundling.
All right, let's be real.
Sometimes you just want a comfortable way to listen to music without blocking out the world and without sacrificing sound quality. And that's where today's sponsor, Raycon, comes in. Since Raycon's essential open earbuds sit just outside your ear canal, you can hear your music super clearly while still picking up everything around you. They're super lightweight, they don't dig in, and thanks to their multi-angular hook design, these earbuds are locked in. So whether I'm at the gym, going out for a run, or knocking out my to-do list, I can rest assured that these will not let me down. One thing that I did not expect to appreciate so much as I've been using them for the past week is the battery life. They give you 8 hours on the earbuds and another 36 in the case, which basically means you can go days without ever charging. I pick them up in the morning for a run, I throw them in when I'm cooking later in the afternoon, and then again when I'm doing my editing, and they still aren't dead. And that's one of those features you don't think about until you realize that you haven't charged them in over a week. But here's the real kicker. Raycon is already giving you the same premium audio quality as the big brands, but at half the price. And with Black Friday and Cyber Monday just around the corner, you can take those savings even further with up to 30% off site-wide. So whether you're upgrading your setup or getting ahead on Christmas gifting, now's the best time to grab a pair. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/hiphopmadnessopen to save up to 30% off before the deals are gone. After he'd firmly established a fan base prior to the release of his third album, Nicki Minaj decried him for it around the release of Queen when she tweeted that his merch bundles were used to ensure that he got the best numbers possible. And sure enough, when Astroworld released, it went on to beat Nicki Minaj's Queen.
How are you selling something that does not have anything to do with your album, but is being counted on Billboard as album sales? But what we not gonna do is have this auto-tune man coming up here selling sweaters and telling y'all he sold 500,000 albums, because he didn't.
Where an album like The Life of a Showgirl was trashed, Travis's Astroworld was so renowned that he could have done incredible numbers even without this extra level of insurance. And the same goes for its follow-up, Utopia. The highest debut of 2023 for a hip-hop project, its 496,000 equivalent album units seem to attest to the fact that the demand for Travis's music was very much intact. But looking deeper, out of his pure 252,000 album sales, roughly 75,000 of them came by way of merch bundles. Considering how much these Billboard-endorsed quote-unquote fan packs paid off for him, it's really no surprise that he's continued with it. And sure enough, when it came time to release Jack Boys 2, he employed the same method. Out of 252,000 first-week sales, an astounding 188,000 came from merch sales alone, leaving him with about 60,000 of pure album sales. And much like Nicki before him, this time renowned rap journalist Elliott Wilson had had enough with these blatant tactics.
The got the cheat code is Travis Scott. This guy cheats the system every time with his direct-to-consumer antics.
Beyond these bundle tactics, which were used to maximize the album's reach, the onset of streaming had also created ways for artists to ensure a #1 album before anyone has even heard so much as a note of the rest of the project outside pre-released singles. One man who enlisted this tactic back when he was still at the height of his relevance was French Montana. Due to tracks like No Stylist and No Shopping featuring Drake and the hit Lockjaw being released prior to the album's release, Montana came complete with headlines that he'd sold 578,000 copies. However, the album itself had shifted 24,000 equivalent album units in sales on the Billboard 200, meaning that those numbers were folded into the album as if they were new, and the result, a plaque for a project that barely made an impact on arrival. And this became the blueprint. Over the years, labels learned that if you stack an album with older hits, you can inflate the numbers instantly. Singles from 2, 3, even 5 years earlier suddenly became first-week sales. And the most recent example came from Cardi B. Her album, Am I the Drama, was certified platinum within the first couple of days, and certified double platinum just 10 days after its release. Not because the album itself moved that many units, but because the 5-year-old singles Up and WAP were counted towards its total. Much like French, the decision was highly critiqued for how transparent it seemed. But to her, it was entirely justifiable. This will be the last and only time I'm gonna address this. WAP and Up are two of my biggest songs. Do you say anything when all these artists pull their little tricks and ponies to sell out? Exactly, go cry about it. Clearly, Cardi's main justification is that if everyone's doing it, then why shouldn't she? But there's another side of the coin that's arguably worse, and that comes from when people actually falsify the interest in their music through bots and bot streams. While this practice is widespread, a recent example of this would be Ice Spice, an artist who was once in the front of the pack for new female rappers and has since wound up on the decline. For a while, her initial claim on tracks like In Hamoud that she got 1 million views in a day were verifiable, but over time it started becoming wildly inaccurate. Debuting at number 18 on the charts, her debut album sold just 28K in the first week. Initially, Ice tried to play it off, comparing the sales to that of her debut EP to suggest she was still on the right path. Like did 15K, so thank you to everyone who supported them and thank you to all the new supporters. These numbers are cool and all, but you should have seen that Boston crowd last night. But make no mistake, it clearly mattered to her and the label enough that she eventually took drastic action, because during the latest phase of her attempt to reassert herself, she was caught botting views on her single Baddie Baddie, boosting the single's first day stream to just under 7 million views. And when fans called this out, Ice had no choice but to acknowledge the fake numbers herself. Considering that her new track Pretty Privilege racked up less than 1 million after 5 days of being released, it's obvious that they thought better on this strategy. While Ice got understandably roasted for that, there are some people who arguably didn't get enough flack for doing similar things. Recently, during a jail call, Young Thug openly admitted that he'd spent $50K to make Gunna's DS4 project beat The Weeknd's album at the time. Rather than being a new phenomenon, the 2020 era was filled with these accusations too. When 6ix9ine and Ariana Grande were battling for the #1 spot, he publicly claimed that a mysterious buyer had purchased 30,000 copies of her single using 6 credit cards to push his track out of first place.
You can buy #1s on Billboard. Last Thursday, Ariana Was Stuck With You submitted 60,000 units last second. With the investigation, we found this. They purchased half of those things with 6 credit cards. When we asked where was those 6 credit cards linked to, Billboard said we can't disclose that information. Understand this, they bought 30,000 and so units with 6 credit cards.
But while he actively went out of his way to speak up about this injustice, it wasn't because he had clean hands. Instead, he conceded that he was speaking from experience and insider knowledge when it came to the release of his track Trolls. During an interview with DJ Vlad, the track's free fall from the top spot to number 34 in its second week aroused some suspicion, and when pressed, he conceded that he had done the same thing. But interestingly, he isn't the only one who finds himself on the outside of an industry he once thrived in, because now some of the very artists who benefited from the system are discovering that speaking out against it can backfire just as quickly. And the artist who's living through that reality right now is Drake. Only months ago, he filed a lawsuit against UMG, claiming that they had conspired with third parties to use bots in order to inflate the numbers of Not Like Us. In his view, his own label was working against him. And just months after making those accusations, the situation became even stranger as questions began to surface about his relationship with one of the biggest streaming platforms in the world. Because recently, it was announced that Spotify is being sued, with estimates from the fraud detection firm BeatDap claiming that up to 10% of all streams are fake, and as a result, siphoning billions in royalties from genuine creators annually. Drizzy himself isn't named as a defendant, but it is alleged that Spotify quote-unquote turned a blind eye in a way that bolstered Drake's record-breaking streaming achievements. As a part of his contention, he claimed that millions of streams of Drake's 2024 single No Face were routed via VPN from Turkey to the UK in a single day to dodge the geographic filters. In addition, he claimed there were other anomalies, including streams clustered in quote-unquote geographic dead zones, with no residential addresses and a tiny fraction, less than 2%, of Drake's listeners generating about 15% of his plays, which they claimed is indicative of bot farms running tracks for 24 hours daily. As the news broke, Spotify issued a statement which read that, quote-unquote, "We cannot comment on pending litigation. However, Spotify in no way benefits from the industry-wide challenge of artificial streaming." Across the industry, one thing that's bleeding into every facet is that there is a lot of distrust over how record sales are counted, moderated, and, in many cases, created. And at the moment, the rise of AI music is only adding to the unease. Where musicians were once the pesky contractors that record labels needed to pay for to keep the music business flourishing, the rise of AI has given them the capabilities to cut out the middleman and keep all the profits for themselves. A prime example of their attempts to do that came along with the launch of FN Meka, an AI-generated rapper whose imagery seemed to tap into harmful stereotypes surrounding hip-hop culture and black people more specifically. As the first of its kind, people were horrified to see what was going down. And thankfully, Capitol heeded the writing on the wall and abandoned the project before it could go too far. But clearly there was no going back, as although it was aborted, there has been a whole variety of them which came along since. In recent months, the emergence of The Velvet Sundown caused fully fledged investigations after they managed to release 2 albums before admitting that their music, images, and backstory were created by AI. Reframed as a quote-unquote art hoax, after pressure was applied, the group's led Sophie Jones, the chief strategy officer at the British phonographic industry, BPI, to demand that everything is demystified. We believe that AI should be used to serve human creativity, not supplant it. That's why we're calling on the UK government to protect copyright and introduce new transparency obligations for AI companies so that music rights can be licensed and enforced, as well as calling for the clear labeling of content solely generated by AI. In the meantime, other things have sprung up, such as Timbaland's AI artist, Tata Taktumi. This new musical being is the end product of the legendary producer's extensive dabbling with the tech. Initially, some fellow artists were intrigued to see just how far he could push it, most notably Swizz Beatz. But others, such as noted AI critic Young Guru, had some tough questions for him. Because when it comes down to it, Guru believes that it is not this innovative software itself that's the problem, but how it can be used to marginalize artistry. I've been trying to tell everyone that this is where we are now with AI. So what do? On one hand, I'm well aware that you can't stop technology. Once the genie is out of the box, you can't put him back in. On the other hand, we have to protect the rights of the artist. Not only artists, but everyone in society. By the looks of it, much of the concern boils down to the fact that AI is still relatively ungoverned. And while it is, those intent on pushing it to the next level have sought to cement its position in the music landscape. Recently, an AI R&B artist by the name of Xania Monet allegedly signed a $3 million record deal. Created, or more accurately, curated by Mississippi-based poet and songwriter Talisha Nikki Jones, Xania landed at number 5 on the charts with the track How Was I Supposed to Know? However, not everyone was happy to accept it. After news of the major deal broke, Kehlani spoke out, declaring that
there is an AI R&B artist who just signed a multi-million-dollar deal and has a top 5 R&B album, and the person is doing none of the work. I think you guys think that AI can just be the cover for something, which some people can use. They can make an AI cover. AI can also make the entire song. It can sing the entire song. It can make the entire beat. This is so beyond out of our control, and nothing and no one on earth will ever be able to justify AI to me.
Despite her sentiments being echoed by the likes of SZA, it hasn't led to widespread rejection from the consumer. Instead, Monet's biggest track has still racked up over 44.4 million official US streams, equating to over $52,000 in a matter of months. And when asked about the creation, Talisha Jones maintains that she's done nothing wrong.
Zanaya is an extension of me, so I look at her as a real person. I wouldn't call it a shortcut because I still put in the work. And anytime something new comes about and it challenges the norm and challenges what we're used to, you're gonna get strong reactions behind it. And I just feel like AI is the new era that we're in.
From pushing labels to invest in algorithms instead of artists, to the possibility of AI being used to extend the careers of artists who aren't even alive anymore. This issue isn't going away anytime soon. And when you place that next to the rise of botted streams, AI, and the blatant tactics used by the biggest names in music to keep their grip on the charts, it forces you to wonder if you'd have to be out of your mind to enter the industry right now. Because clearly we've reached a point where the most underhanded tactics aren't even happening in the shadows. They're in full view.